Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative podcast with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. We ask that you like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. You can also download it, listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. A message that is not always said in the mainstream media and something ears need to hear, eyes need to hear this show, and we need your help to do that. Another great program lined up for you and another great guest. He's coming back on the show, a friend of the show, Dr. Stephen Ellis from Cumberland, Colchester, Member of Parliament for that riding and also the critic for health, the Shadow Minister for Health, a good man. Thanks for coming back on.
Well, thanks very much, Jamie. And I wore my shirt today that has my name and riding on in case you forgot who I was. So I thought that was important to highlight that.
Well, I have my name behind me here in case you forget who I am. So it's all good. We're going to talk about something I think it is affecting every corner of the province, and that is a shortage of physicians, shortage of nurses, healthcare professionals. You see emergency rooms closing in British Columbia, led by the NDP. You see the same thing happen in Liberal Newfoundland, Labrador, and yes, in Ontario provinces as well, with provincial governments of the blue stripe. So it is happening everywhere. You're a doctor. What's going on? It just seems to be a labor shortage and a whole bunch of things. Why don't you give us your perspective?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, there's 6.5 million Canadians without access to primary care. And of course, that could either be a family doctor or a nurse practitioner. And that creates significant problems because, of course, the system that we have, you need to have access to a primary care provider so that you can access things like lab, diagnostic imaging, X-ray, CT, MRI, et cetera, ultrasound, or access a specialist. That's the Canadian system that we have. So when you don't have access, of course, what happens is you end up going to the emergency room. Emergency rooms become overburdened. People wait there a long time. And then, of course, bad things can happen to them. And we've seen that, sadly, here in Nova Scotia, we've seen it, but I think in every province we've seen the tragic stories of people who have died in emergency rooms. And that, of course, cannot continue to happen. Related to that, though, is your question off the top is what's going on and why does there appear to be a shortage? Certainly I think that we all know that times change. I know that I was a family doctor for almost 25 years, and the person that I took over from, I worked less than he did. He was that ultimate family physician, so that Jamie, if you fell down at home and you said, I think I broke my leg, you would call the doctor and he would show up at your house and say, oh, no, your leg's fine, get up and walk, you're good. You don't need anything, pat you on the head. Those times changed. We knew that very clearly. For those emergency things, we've developed this incredible system across most of the country where if you have an emergency, you can call an ambulance if it's that style, or you can go to the emergency room when you know you need an intervention, such as stitches or a cast, et cetera, or if you need, diagnostic imaging. So things have changed significantly from that style of medicine. Now, even further to understand that even from the style of medicine that I practiced, which, I provided inpatient care, a family medicine office, emergency room. I had a chronic pain clinic that I was a part of, nursing home visits, et cetera. We know that places a significant burden upon healthcare providers and on their families as well. And so that those, not everybody, now, don't get me wrong, that's an unfair characterization, but many folks who are going into medicine have determined that is a lot to ask. And so medicine's now being practiced even more differently, if that's the correct English, than the way I practiced it. So I think that those are the things that are creating significant problems.
So we have, as I mentioned, emergency room closings, but we also have family physicians that are hard to find. As you mentioned, nurse practitioners are coming in to try to fill that gap and fix it. And a lot of this is managed, well, pretty much all of it's managed by the province. But there is something the federal government can do, and that's something our leader has talked about, and I know you've talked about it many times. And that's a Blue Seal program. Tell us a bit about that.
So the Blue Seal program is really built upon this knowledge that there are physicians who have trained internationally who have come to Canada under federal programs which say, hey, you're a physician, you should come to Canada, we'd love to have you here. But then there's no way for them, or no easy way for them, to access the possibility of becoming a doctor who can work in Canada. And in some cases, perhaps it's justified. We have standards that we have established in Canada for training and knowledge, et cetera. In other cases, though, it's not. And even those folks are finding it almost impossible to get a license to practice in Canada. Of course, if you don't have a license, you can't practice. It doesn't matter what your training is. So the Blue Seal program would be really built on the fact that it's related to, if you can demonstrate that you have the knowledge, the cultural ability, and the language ability to be a physician in Canada, then you should be a physician in Canada. And on top of that, we would also have a national licensing program so that if you were a physician licensed to practice I'm here in Nova Scotia, if I were licensed in Nova Scotia, then I could practice anywhere in Canada. I'll use the analogy for folks out there listening of your driver's license. You don't have to get a new driver's license when you move to British Columbia. Well, eventually you do. But certainly if you're visiting there, you can drive with a Nova Scotia driver's license. So those are the ideas. And I have to tell you, I had a meeting with one of our colleagues, Anna Roberts, who's riding as King Vaughan, just north of GTA. And we met with around 25 physicians who'd been here variably from 20 years to 6 months. And none of them were able to gain licensure here in Canada. And sadly, one of the things that really stuck with me is two things. One is one of the physicians who was a security guard, his children said to him, Dad, why are you going to work in this security guard outfit when we know you're a doctor? That was heart-wrenching. And the second part of it was another physician who had been here. He had many cousins who were physicians back in his home country, and I can't remember which it was, and I apologize for that. But he said, first of all, he told them not to come because internationally, Canada has become known as the graveyard for physicians. Now, isn't that a reputation to have?
Oh,
Sick.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is the bureaucracy within these provincial organizations, these licensing bodies, are just slowed right down? Like, was this a problem before the pandemic, or has this just grown worse throughout the 3 years?
It's just continued to grow worse, and there's really no easy pathway for internationally trained physicians to get work here and gain licensure here in Canada. So those are the things that we want to work with the provinces to remedy. And we know, and I've met with 5 of the provincial ministers already, and certainly we know that there is significant interest in how we would make this happen, and significant support. And there's already been some work. As hard as this is to believe, but even physicians trained in the United States didn't have easy access to come to Nova Scotia, which now the registrar here in Nova Scotia has rectified. And we also know that the 4 Atlantic provinces are saying if you are licensed in one of the Atlantic provinces, then you can work in any of the Atlantic provinces. So we do see some movement on this. But what we really wanted, and I think what Canadians expect, is to have a homogeneous system across the country so that, whatever's happening in Nova Scotia is the same in BC or Alberta, Ontario, and that's what I mean by homogeneous. It's the same. And I think that's certainly, as a Canadian, that's my expectation. It should be the same everywhere.
I think when you're sick and you can't find a doctor, you don't really care where, you obviously they have to get standards and show that they're disciplined and all that other stuff. But at the same time, I don't care if someone's been licensed in Nova Scotia and is practicing on Ontario. Like, this should be something that we didn't leave till 2023 to deal with, I think.
No, and I think many Canadians are absolutely astonished when we talk about this, when they hear it as an issue. They say, well, this doesn't make any sense. And we know that, as well as most of our listeners do, that there is a Red Seal program out there for carpenters, electricians, plumbers, et cetera, other tradespeople, so that once you gain that certification in one province, you can then, of course, practice anywhere in the country. And that really is a sensible program that we would use to kind of build this upon. So I think that makes sense. One of the things that I would highlight, though, is the inability for Canadian citizens who've chosen, for whatever reason, to be trained abroad. Ireland is somewhere they often train. The Caribbean is somewhere they often train. That even those Canadian citizens who obviously are familiar with our language and familiar with our culture are still unable to gain a spot back in Canada. And I think that's just a travesty for those young people who have this burning desire to be part of our system. And we have already established, obviously, that we have a significant need in our system. And as Canadian citizens, they can't gain licensure here in Canada. And that is something that a Conservative government would rectify as well.
And I've heard I have two stories that I've heard in my time here of Canadians from my area going off to different countries and getting trained, getting their license, but unable to come back despite being a Canadian citizen, despite growing up here, not being able to actually practice, despite a massive physician shortage in every corner of this country.
I mean, it's nonsensical. There was a story in the news the other day, a female physician who had, I think, practiced in Australia for 10 years, who was a Canadian citizen, who said, hey, I'll come back to Canada. I don't think so. No, I don't think. I mean, this would be someone who is in the prime of their career, really at the height of knowledge. And I think any of our listeners are out there that they would also agree that you wouldn't think that the climate in Australia from a medical perspective is that different from Canada. So how could this individual have such a difficult time coming back into her own country? And to me, that's inexcusable. Those are the things that we need to change. And those are the things that we need to make a significant priority for Canadians.
And you're right. You can even argue it's a Commonwealth country, for crying out loud. If there aren't, countries that you could really find common ground with, it would be a Commonwealth country. And yet we can't seem to do that.
Yeah, before I decided to do this job and was fortunate enough to be elected, that was one of the things that my wife and I had actually talked about in our, perhaps quote unquote retirement plans. And in my understanding of the research that I've done is that because I hold a license in Canada, that I could easily get a license in Australia. So why would we not have that reciprocity if the Australian government can recognize that the training is the same, the illnesses are generally the same, then obviously there may be some difference in names of medications, et cetera, which is all learnable things. If the Australians can recognize that, why can't the government, this Liberal government of Canada, cannot seem to recognize that? So that's a commitment that we would make as Conservatives to say, we'll change this.
I like that plan. And we don't have to get into it now, but just as a reminder to those watching and listening, there are actually significant trade barriers in our country where different provinces can't trade their goods back and forth. In some cases, it's actually easier for some provinces to do business with another country altogether than it is another Canadian province. And it's these hurdles, these gatekeeping hurdles that need to be removed in order to allow Canada to be the freest nation in the world.
Well, and of course, as we improve those things, as a Conservative government will, and we have businesses that want to come here and they want to make their businesses bigger, employ more people. Obviously, when you have those economies of scale, you can pay your people more, you can give them better benefits. Those are the things, again, that, as our leader Pierre Poilievre would say, you get bigger, more powerful paychecks, and that allows you to improve the life of not just yourself, but your family and your community, your business, et cetera. And everybody benefits from that, to removing those barriers and those gatekeepers that really keep people and businesses under the thumb of the Liberal government.
And if you look at most of the stats, the freest countries in the world are usually the happiest countries in the world. The more the government clamps down, the more government restricts your movements, your choice making, and the list goes on, the more unhappy the population gets. And so this is something that needs to be repeated many times, that when we make this the freest country in the world, you will see paychecks get bigger. You will see attitudes change. You will see that possibilities are almost endless if you get the gatekeepers out of the way.
You know what? Lots of people out there, will say, well, we already are free in Canada. And we are. I mean, we do have
absolutely.
freedoms. But there's this significant undercurrent of gatekeeping and red tape that doesn't need to exist, that could easily be eliminated, and that would make everybody's lives significantly better. I really love the idea that Pierre Poilievre has to say, I will incentivize municipalities who get out of the way of building new houses and new apartment buildings, et cetera. And to me, that really makes sense to say, hey, you know what? You want to do this? You want to do the right thing because people need a place to live. And of course, housing in any way, shape, or form is exceedingly expensive now, that we will actually then incentivize municipalities who want to do the right thing and help people find a decent place to live.
And with anything business, it doesn't matter, investments, it always takes the path of least resistance. And there is a reason for that, right? Like business moves very fast. Government does not. And when those hurdles are in place, investment goes elsewhere. Like it's very easy for the most part to invest all over the world in companies that are doing business everywhere. And when you have investors trying to hear a pitch from a project in Canada, but at a similar project in another country, knowing that you can get something off the ground faster and see a return on your investment. And I know that's a dirty word for some on the left. Yes, profit. You're going to probably take that if they're limited dollars. So we need to ensure that Canada is competitive once again, and that we are making it, while ensuring all the checks and balances are in place, making it a smooth and quick process. Either way, yes or no on any project.
Absolutely. I always sum that up in my mind by saying Canada needs to have a favorable business environment. We need to be business friendly. That's how people go to work every day. That's how they have benefits. That's how they feed their families and pay their bills, keep the lights on, and in the winter, keep the heat on. Those are the things that we need to change. We need good jobs that pay people well for doing the work that we ask them to do in this incredibly natural resource rich country. And we have people out there, and we know that when we allow Canadians to work hard, that they can improve their own situation in life, that they want to work hard, that they want their families to be one step ahead of where they were when they were the same age. And that's what I've always wanted for my own family. And I'm sure almost all of our viewers want the same thing. And that's the type of Canada that we conservatives want to see and that we talk about.
Doc Ellis, I've kept you here long enough, but I do appreciate your time. As you know, guests get the last word, but I don't know if you can top that, but I encourage you to try or maybe not.
Well, give a politician a microphone. That being said, we know very clearly that there are immigrant physicians who've been trained internationally who are unable to practice in Canada. That's one of the things that we want to change. We want to ensure that the Blue Seal program allows physicians who are licensed in one province to work anywhere in this country. And we want to ensure that those Canadian citizens who have chosen to train abroad will be able to come back and work in their chosen profession in the healthcare here in Canada. So lots and lots of work to be done on healthcare. That's a smattering of one very small part of the platform that you'll hear as we get closer and closer to election. And it's my pleasure to be a part of all that.
Dr. Stephen Ellis, Member of Parliament for Cumberland Colchester in the beautiful province of Nova Scotia. Also the Shadow Minister for Health. We appreciate your time. The second episode this summer. Love to have you on. I appreciate you doing that. Appreciate your time as well. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this program. You'll be notified of new episodes that pop up every single Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget, you can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. Tell your friends they can do it too. New content every single Tuesday. without hesitation, throughout the summer, there will be something new to talk about, and Dr. Ellis's second program this summer. I love it. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.